In the early 8th century, there was one empire that was, well, pretty much the known world. It stretched all the way from the Atlantic to Central Asia. We're talking about the Umayyad Caliphate. And today, we're going to dig into the incredible story of how a revolt on its farthest frontier managed to break that empire for good.
All right, to really get a sense of the scale here, let's just start with a number, 29%. At its absolute peak, the Umayyad Caliphate was home to nearly a third of the entire world's population. It was a massive global superpower, run from Damascus and a real powerhouse of its time.
So that's the big question, right? How does an empire that huge get fractured? And not from a rebellion near its capital, but from the Maghreb, the farthest, most distant edge of its territory. Well, the answer really comes down to two things: a deep, systemic injustice and a radical new idea.
To really get why this revolt happened, you've got to understand what life was actually like for people on the ground. See, the Umayyads built a very hierarchical empire, and that decision, it had some pretty serious consequences.
And this is where a really key term comes in, the Mawali. In theory, when you converted to Islam, you became part of the global community of Muslims, the Ummah. But in practice, not so much. The Umayyad rulers treated non-Arab converts, like the Berbers of North Africa, as second-class citizens.
And this is where the unfairness becomes just crystal clear. If you were a Mawali, you were considered Muslim enough to be drafted into the Caliphate's armies to go fight and die. But, and here's the kicker, you were still forced to pay the jizya, which was the heavy tax specifically for non-Muslims, so you had all the duties of a citizen, but none of the rights or financial benefits.
Now, for just a minute there, it looked like things might actually change for the better. A new caliph, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, came to power, and he saw this injustice for what it was. He started getting rid of these discriminatory taxes and tried to make Arab and non-Arab Muslims equal. You could imagine there was this huge sense of hope.
But yeah, that hope didn't last long. The Umayyad elite saw these reforms as a direct threat to their power, and after just 3 years in charge, he was assassinated. With his death, the old, unfair policies just snapped right back into place. And just like that, the door to peaceful change, it was slammed shut. So you've got all this injustice, right? That's the fuel for the fire. But you still need a spark. And that spark was an idea, a powerful religious ideology called Kharijism.
You see, Kharijism was a complete rejection of how the Umayyads did things. They believed the leader of all Muslims shouldn't be based on which Arab tribe you came from, but should simply be the best Muslim, the most pious, the most just. It didn't matter if you were Arab, Persian, Berber, none of that mattered. And for the Mawali, this idea was absolutely electric.
Now, not all Kharijites were the same. You had some extreme groups and more peaceful ones. But the ones that really took root in the Maghreb were the Sufrites. They believed in piety, for sure, but they added something crucial. They believed that if you had a corrupt ruler, it was your religious duty to overthrow them.
Okay, so the stage is set. You've got the injustice, you've got the revolutionary idea, and in 739, it all comes together. The western edge of the empire just explodes in what we now call the Great Berber Revolt. And what happened next was just incredibly fast. It's stunning. The revolt kicks off in Tangier. The local governor sends his best troops to shut it down. They get crushed. So the caliph in Damascus sends his own elite Syrian army, a massive force. And at the Battle of the Nobles, they too were completely wiped out. In just 4 years, it was over.
So you have to be asking, how in the world did a rebel army pull this off against a superpower? Well, one of the biggest reasons was that the caliph's own armies basically hated each other. The local army knew the terrain, but they were treated like dirt by the arrogant elite army from Syria. This rivalry led to a total disaster in coordination, and the Berber rebels, they took full advantage.
And just like that, the Umayyad Caliphate was broken. They would never again rule the entire Maghreb. So what rose up from the ashes?
Well, what used to be one big solid province just shattered. It broke apart into this incredible patchwork of different independent states. The Abbasids, who would eventually take over from the Umayyads, only managed to hang on to a tiny piece. The rest was a whole new world of kingdoms, many of them built on those Kharijite ideals.
But out of all that chaos, one state in particular started to really stand out. It became the new heart of the Kharijite movement, and it was led by a pretty unlikely guy who was just perfectly suited to bring all these different Berber tribes together.
His name was Abdul Rahman ibn Rustam. He was a respected scholar, a proven leader,
But here was his secret weapon, the thing that made him the perfect choice. He was Persian. By picking an outsider, no single Berber tribe could claim they were in charge. He was the perfect neutral candidate, the perfect compromise.
So from his new capital in what's now Algeria, Ibn Rustam built this new state, the Rustamid Imamate, and it became this beacon for Kharijites from all over the world. It was a real, functioning state built on their ideals, and it drew in scholars and traders from everywhere.
But this is where we get to the ultimate irony. The whole Kharijite movement was born out of opposition to inherited dynastic power, right? The idea that rule is just passed down from father to son. Yet, when Ibn Rustam died, the leaders couldn't agree on a successor, so they elected his son. And with that, a new dynasty was born. So the question we're left with is, in their attempt to build a just state, did they end up creating the very thing they fought so hard to destroy?